Hello, everyone online. We did run over a little late this morning, so we're starting at 2:15. So we'll start in about 10 more minutes or so, just to let you know. We have 4 minutes.
Hello. There we go. I was saying hello, Barbara, online. We've met before? Yeah, you look familiar. Where are you?
I'm in North Carolina.
North Carolina.
Thank you.
How was your lunch? Did everyone eat as much as I ate? So now I'm feeling rather leaden. So this is a great time to rekindle our motivation. Think about your motivation again. And any time of the day, you can recenter yourself in this way. And if you're reflecting on death and impermanence in general, and by understanding the nature of change, knowing that my death is inevitable, may I make the most meaning, once again, of this particular moment in time. Right now, here, from this moment on, for the rest of the day, directing my energy as much as possible towards moving me along a path that helps me reach a state where I'm unlimited in helping all living beings. That's the crux of the Mahayana motivation, of the Mahayana path. If you like that, please roll that into your motivation. Setting yourself up for all the activities of the rest of your day. Please relax. We were talking about the dissolutions that occur at the death time. Again, they occur at other times of your life right now. And will we recognize those dissolutions, those experiences that are innate with the mind, that are not separate from the mind, like that? Any more questions about those right now? Because I know we were short, we were out of time. The 8 dissolutions that occur at the death time, again, they experience when you have a big yawn, a big sneeze, sexual orgasm, and every night when you fall asleep, and it's, you can check tonight when you go to sleep. It's tricky, like, you know that period where sometimes you're wide awake, not falling asleep, but then suddenly it's coming. You can almost feel it behind your eyes. And then, I usually just drop off before I have any consciousness of any visions. It's so hard. But sometimes you can get another vision at a different time, something, and it usually comes from that most subtle consciousness, like that. But again, we meditate on them repeatedly to familiarize our mind with that, so we will recognize that at the death time. And you certainly try your best, like that. And it is good to just imprint that into the mind as much as possible. Any other comments about that? Or
Wait for the mic.
Susie?
So there's someone I talk to frequently. She's a member here, and she's both a MRI and an X-ray technologist. And she asked me, I was talking with the other day, and she said, part of what I give MRIs for and the CAT scans is when they're just determining whether someone is brain dead or not.
And they can determine that in an MRI or a scan?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's just no activity or at all. What they scientifically caught.
Right.
And so, but they're not dead.
Right.
There's no
Right.
physical death hasn't happened.
Yeah.
And she said to me, well, what do they think about? And I said, I think it's above my pay grade. And, but, we talked some more, and what we did get to was, we're trying to understand it in a conceptual way. And probably what's very possibly happening to the person is not conceptual. But so I said, look, General Blamey's going to be here. I'll ask her,
Right.
So I don't know if that question is clear, but.
Yes, I honestly, are there any medical professionals in here? I'm just curious. Because this is a question I've had, also related to Alzheimer's, dementia patients. Question I have is, I do remember now these brain scans. They did some to my mother when she was in a coma for so many months. And then I've heard that where they look at the scan, and actually one doctor in the ICU showed us, after my mother had a stroke, he showed us the before and after of her brain. So, and there was clearly a difference. And then he said, you see this area where there's nothing now, that was damaged by the stroke and that won't come back. And she's, and it was, my father and I were there, and I just remember it was like, first of all, it was so disturbing, having this be your mother, and that basically saying, like, she's out of commission now after, as a result of this head injury that caused the stroke and whatever. It was just complicated. But I wasn't kind of done with, I was a little bit like, well, but this other parts of the brain are functioning. Like, couldn't it recover? And they do say there's some recovery with stroke patients. I have heard about that and talked to some medical friends of mine. But sometimes when there's no activity and they show this blank and they say he's brain dead, I've often wondered, I was like, well, are you sure? Like, that's the brain, but could there be some consciousness that would have some good karma that could bring something back? Because anything's possible in a sense, and yet, is it? It may not be. It may not be. No, medically, this has happened, and that is now physically damaged forever, and it's not coming back. So I always wondered about that myself.
Yeah. But I think her question was, what we were talking about, and I said, well,
Is what's the person experiencing in that
what
state?
is the person, and also to never talk about the person when you're in the room in third person, because we just never, I mean, that's just standard. Standard operating position. And then the other thing that is connected to this is that people that are choosing to be organ donors, people, and I'll talk about this, but they cut the body open when it is still physically alive.
Well, they have to harvest the organs.
What I'm saying is that can be very disturbing unless you have great bodhicitta. That could be very disturbing to the mind stream.
Yeah, I mean, basically, the thing. But the one thing I wondered is, what is the person thinking? And I had with Alzheimer's, where they're in a fantasy world. Sometimes I've dealt with Alzheimer's patients where they're talking about a reality that I'm not experiencing, and something else is coming up in their mind. And I've asked lamas about this. I've never gotten a satisfactory answer of where are they in that space. I don't really know yet how to answer. And what do they think about when they're saying they're brain dead? What's their consciousness experiencing has been my question. What is the consciousness experiencing when clinically, Westernly, they're saying, well, there's no brain function. The brain function's very low. And you can tell externally the person's not functioning because the physical matter is damaged. On a subtle level, I don't know, and I've never gotten an answer that that they didn't know. Some of them said they didn't know what was happening. I mean, an omniscient consciousness would know exactly what they're experiencing, but it could be in such a subtle form it's not able to move through the body to manifest in any functional way. So at that point, maybe it is okay we would normally let the person pass away on their own, but Rinpoche's given different advice to people. So this is something else. What Buddhists tend to do is if you've got somebody with cancer, long-term suffering, whatever, if they are hooked up to machines at that point, if that's something they wanted, right? Rinpoche's given different advice, but Buddhists would consult with their lama. That's what they consult with somebody they have confidence in. Like people bring their priest in, they want to know, the priest to advise. Their religious consultant, they would bring somebody in. And so what we did in different things, I had friends in the Santa Cruz area, he was dying of colon cancer. And this was a guy in his 40s, he was young. He was a student of ours at one of the centers, and the family consulted with Rinpoche. Rinpoche was in the area, and he was a student, and he wanted, and Rinpoche said to them, keep him on life support as long as possible. That was Rinpoche's advice, okay? And then another student, their father was dying. He was, I think, in his 80s. This was a major benefactor of Rinpoche, and Rinpoche assessed and does a divination, and he was on life support at that point, right? Not expected to recover or something. And Rinpoche said, get all the family there, and then it was okay to unplug the life support. And he passed away 24 hours later. Like that with the family. So it's very different, it's very individual. If you believe you know a real, highly realized being that you feel confident to consult in, you could certainly feel, if you feel confident and you ask the whole family, is it okay to check? Then they can check, and then you need to follow the advice. If you ask a teacher for anything, follow the advice. Don't then say, I don't like that advice, I'm not going to do it, I'm going to go to somebody else, because your spiritual progress will get they'll have obstacles like that. So it's important that anytime you're asking a teacher, you're having a meeting, you're asking for specific advice, do what they ask you to do. Don't just do it because you want to hang out with them. And that's not what you do. You don't meet teachers to hang out with them and things like that. So that's something I think, it's very individual also as far as how to take care of them. But as far as what they're thinking and experiencing, I don't know what really would happen in the brain dead situation. I think you do the best you can. This is the other thing is you will be doing the best you can as caregiving. And sometimes you're going to feel guilty that you don't feel it's your best. And people blame themselves and go through all kinds of torturous experiences. So relax all that, please. Relax it. I've had people blame themselves, as I mentioned before, because, when I was there for days and weeks and months, and then when I went to get coffee, my dad died. I wasn't there. It's okay. It's totally okay. It could have been what he wanted, but he couldn't express that anymore, right? So people beat themselves up, And also there's people that didn't leave you their wishes. You don't know what they want. And now there's the doctor going, she needs a feeding tube. You go, I don't, and you're consulting with siblings, and I don't know what she wanted. They never said. And then there's fighting among you. The main thing is to be harmonious as a family. And you may have a dominant sibling that's like, I know this is what dad would have wanted, and try to find a harmonious way in. And the best thing is have your wishes all written down and legalized. Give them to 2 or 3 people that you know will carry out your wishes. We're going to talk about that later. Okay? That's really important to get your paperwork together on every level. Your passwords need to be written down and documented. And again, they're part of that document. They're part of that document. The most torturous things I've heard are people, the husband dies suddenly, heart attack, 50 years old. You don't expect that. The wife's left. She can't access any of the bank accounts. She doesn't have any passwords for anything, any of the accounts. He took care of it all. She goes to the bank, she explains, and he's like, well, you don't have the code for the such and such. We can't. You end up in probate court with certain things. It's just a hassle for everybody left behind. Total hassle and confusion. And so again, sometimes you're on your own or you got siblings all going forward together, but you didn't know what mom wanted. And then they go, well, we have this and and then you basically make the best decision you can. You talk to the doctors and you say, some might be 50 years old. You might have a different view. They might be 85 years old. You may choose to do something different. Did she want invasive surgery at this age? So all you're going to do is make the decisions. You make the best decision you can, and then just move on and let it go. You're not making a decision to torture somebody. Don't make a decision to get back at another sibling because they would have wanted to do it differently. Don't get into those games at that time when you're taking care of somebody, and keep it as simple as possible. And it's challenging. It's a challenging time. Like that. It's the same thing in birth. There's lots of decisions to be made when you're bringing a child into the world, right? Those of you that had babies, I have friends, all kinds of things. And sometimes it doesn't go according to what you wanted. You're having a home birth. You've talked about this for 3 years. Okay? You got the midwives, you got your partner all signed up. It's happening, and then it's not working. You have the waiting pool in your living room. It's all ready to go. But it's just not happening. Baby's not coming, or this isn't happening, and now this, and you don't want to get to an emergency. And same thing in birth. There's all these decisions. The thing is, usually at the end, you get a baby, a healthy baby, and everybody's happy at the end. What happens in death is it's the person kind of is slipping away, and they're looking different, and they're starting to look like a skull, the face, and we don't like that. We want things to be shiny and young and healthy and glowing. Okay? So we have to adjust our minds because youth is honored in our world. And that makes it challenging when your hair turns white and when your skin loses its luster and you're not seen anymore. You're kind of, people pass over and you're talking with younger people. Where was I that I was just, because I teach people of all ages and I love teaching young people. I really resonate with them. I really enjoy. But boys, sometimes they talk really fast. Right? And they're just moving like 1,000,000 miles a minute, like I was when I was young. And they're not really listening to you, and they're not really paying attention. And, it's just different things. So different times. So just taking all that into we have this worship of the young, and so there's a lot. Are you honoring people in their old age in your own life? How do you feel about it? Because if you feel that it's beautiful and wonderful and so much wisdom to gain from older people and things like that, you'll see it as more beautiful. And some of the times with my dad when he had cancer, in the end, the very end, my siblings and I sitting around with him, it was some magical time there with him. Magical moments. And I was living with him the last few years of his stories. Did he have any short-term memory? Not much, like most older people don't. But long-term memory, the stories he had of my grandparents and living here and doing that, it was wonderful stories, wonderful things. So you can have really a very nice period of that with somebody. And the golden age of rather than it just being a burden for you and being a pain of, just focused on the negative stuff like that. There were certainly negative things of, living with an old man like that, but there were lots of other positive things like that. And so also if you're caretaking your parents, I would say on one level, now we all have different relationships with our parents, but if you can get to the point, it's an honor. It's kind of an honor to be good. Look what they gave you. They gave you a precious human rebirth. They gave you this life. Now, they didn't do everything perfectly because I don't know your parents, but my parents were not Buddhas, didn't seem. So only Buddhas do things perfectly. Only highly realized beings do things perfectly. But they did the best they could. And I know where they studied parenting. They didn't get to go to the Harvard of parenting schools like all of you went to, right? Yeah. Right? There's no training for being a parent. Can you imagine? It's the most important job you have on the planet is being a parent. And there's no training other than how your parents did it. Or what you read in a book, or what you liked a method somebody else did, so you want to mirror that. Well, good for you. There are some parenting classes now. I know some friends have, friends of mine with teenagers joined conscious parenting classes. I couldn't salute them anymore. They realized, this is a lot, and they decided to join these programs. I thought, brilliant. And they got so much out of it. They have a great relationship with their kids, but they realized they needed a little bit more than what they were just doing, picking up from their friends. So our parents did the best they could. So to honor them in their transition out, they helped us in our transition in and growing up and all those things. And we're really talking about, for most of us, a very short period of time that we're helping usher them out. Meaning it could be maximum sometimes 5 to 10 years. And often it's less than that. But they spent 15 to 18, 20 years with us, some of us more, getting us launched like that. And they never finish being a parent, even when you're 35, right? They're still worried so it's a great thing. But again, you can set boundaries with them if they're very negative and it's a challenge if it's been somebody who's abused you. Maybe you can't do that for them. You're not going to be there for them. You don't have a relationship with them. That's all understandable. But if you just do decide and you want to caretake one or both parents, it can be seen as an honor. You're just going to do the best you can. And can you do it consciously if they're still lucid? How do they want to do it? Can you openly discuss that with them? Sometimes a hard conversation to have. Maybe it comes up naturally just in everyday talk. My mother could never discuss what she wanted in death. I tried to talk to her about it. She says, I don't want to talk about that. It's morbid. I can't. Never could discuss it. Never wanted to hear it. I didn't know what she wanted. She had no written instructions. So I had no idea, and I'd sometimes just try to find an appropriate moment. No, I don't want to discuss it, okay? So my grandmother, her mother lived to be 99. I was very involved in my grandmother's life, and she's the only grandparent I had when I was born. And my mom, so we were all going forward, my brother, mother, and I would consult when my grandmother was really failing the last year and in the hospital, and like that. So my mother would call us with, and then when my grandmother died at the end, there was an appropriate moment I said to my mother, I said, wasn't it easier because we knew what she wanted? I said, it was so much easier because we could just do what she wanted until the doctors told us we can't do anymore. But and I said, and that's the only reason I just want to know what you want. And then she just flat out told me exactly what she wanted. She was totally ready to unload it. She's just like, yeah, she realized, yes. So that's what we did for my mom. We just honored her wishes, and she just verbalized it, but that's that. We went forward. That was fine. It was fine with my siblings. We were like that. So again, you're just going to do the best you can. So I want to talk about we're going to talk more about caregiving, but getting us ready. And sorry, was that just answer?
Next week will be some of the technical ways of doing like an advanced life directive, and also, how to record what you want, but also some of the difficulties of the conversation. And my experience has been that is to talk about the fact that don't approach them about what do you want me to do about your death,
Right.
But to say, gee, you want me to drive you now because you're less comfortable driving. When you can't do things for yourself anymore or something,
That's right.
you want to let it go.
Yeah.
How can I help you the best?
That's right. That's right.
Get your favorite channel on TV. Those kinds of simple
Yeah,
things.
you really want to have those very compassionate conversations, and
So you don't even have to move. At some point you may, but you don't even have to move to the death place to begin to understand.
That's right.
What they want.
Right.
That's all. But I just wanted to say that some of the technical stuff of where you can do it and where it holds up legally, I'll try to talk about next week.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about some of that in here as well. Yeah. So there's transitions. What Venerable Khandro is talking about is transitional talking. Okay? So my dad was computer literate. He was an engineer. So when computers came in, he wanted to learn, got on a computer, we got him a computer, right? Then he learned how to pay all his bills online. This is impressive. Somebody older, right? Got it all set up, and he set it up himself. And then he started slipping. So what happened is, and a lot of people do this, there's you set it up, right? Hit the thing, you're going to do it, and then it asks you to confirm that, right? To pay it. He'd forget the confirm button. He'd have it set up and do it. A lot of people do that, younger. I know people who go, I forgot to do it, and I forgot to transfer, and I thought I transferred the money, but it wasn't there. Okay, it's very normal. But he started doing repeatedly, where I'm getting messages, the bill wasn't paid, there's another. So then I said to him, well, let's look at what's going on. Let me watch you do it. Do you want me to sit down with you? Yeah. He said, yeah. Okay, so we sat down, and I watched what he did, and I said, oh, okay. I said, it just needs another confirmation here. So he said, oh, and then he saw that, and he remembered. And then I just said, do you want me to do the bills for you sometimes? And then he right away, and this is what he wanted, but he didn't know how to ask. And then he said, yeah, can you pay the bills? I said, sure, okay, sure. So that was the next step. He didn't want to do the bills anymore because he wasn't really tracking it that well. And what happens, especially for older men, the vulnerability comes up, but men aren't allowed to announce that they feel vulnerable. Women are better at saying, I feel vulnerable. But people don't like to say they're vulnerable anyway. So if we want to segue over to one of my favorite sociologists, Brené Brown, talks about vulnerability. What's wrong with vulnerability? Okay? Our culture says something's wrong with it. She reframes it. She says vulnerability is the birthplace of creativity, innovation, and change. That's very different than weakness, that our culture sees weakness. So I have to say, I go around the planet, and it gets harder as I get older to travel. I'm less fond of it. Airline travel, forget, I'm done. But it's the only way I can really get to some places, but I'm so over it. You can put me on a boat any day or a train. I'm very happy. And I'm even happy to drive in a car. But I can't drive in a car to Nepal. This is the last time I checked. I'd like to, but I can't. So airline travel, all these things, and I feel more vulnerable going around at times. At times I'll really be like, I'm kind of tired now, and I really need a break, but now I have this journey, and I have to teach after, so try to build in some good things, and you hope the flights go smoothly and things like that. So, but you think about innovation, creativity, and change. So I just get more creative of where I'm going to take a rest stop when I'm laying over there. Had a really good experience in Delhi last year because I had a 12-hour layover. Okay? So 12-hour layover waiting in the Delhi airport in India, way too much for me. Like I'm like, forget, I don't want to do that again. They do have now a transit hotel. It's not cheap though, in the airport. I could have done that. I did it once before, but it was expensive. And so I found an Airbnb. I had a visa for India, right? And the Airbnb said, and let me know, and I purposely booked this one, let me know if you'd like an air-conditioned taxi to pick you up. Yes, I would. Okay? Air-conditioned taxi off to the Airbnb in a neighborhood I used to know that I wanted to go to. Had my little 12 hours, had a nap, had a shower, all of that air-conditioned taxi back to the airport was well cheaper than the transit hotel. So you innovate, you figure out what do I feel safe with and what will work out. And so again, there's transitional talks where that was one step for him, didn't feel comfortable, didn't know how to say to me. So can you feel it out when somebody's feeling vulnerable, but they act too strong to say, I'm scared right now, or I can't do this anymore, or I need help. That's hard for guys to say, I need help. A guy that was the strength of the family for years, who suddenly, so I just monitored that with my dad of when he wanted me to take him to doctor's appointments, when he wanted me to be there to hear what the doctor was saying, because he couldn't remember, like that. And then, but there's a respectful way to be there in the thing. So he had one doctor when he moved to an assisted living center near the very end, and then we got him a gerontologist. These are great people when people are older. Gerontologists, they're trained in dealing with medicine for old people. That's what they do. That's their job. So we had this great doc that we loved. He was older as well. But when I went into the visit with my father, and it was in my father's building, keep it simple. My father would get on his scooter, I would walk next to him, and he'd ride over, and all the doors in the assisted living open automatically for scooters. So we just pull right over, he'd ride right over, I'd come as well, and then we'd sit down with the doctor, and I made sure, because my dad was still tracking really well, that the doctor talks to my father, he's the patient. We're not going to talk around him like he doesn't exist. It's like, first, you present Dad, let the doctor ask him, and the only thing I would do, and I asked my father if it was okay, if you're presenting something that I'm not finding completely accurate, based on what you remember, can I just tell him what my experience is? Like, so the doctor would say, did you exercise last week? And my father was like, oh yeah, but he hasn't for 2 weeks. I might just say, he hasn't really done much in a couple of weeks. So, but I'd let him conduct most of the meeting and hear, but then he wasn't going to remember what the doctor told him. So then I just take notes on that and then be there. We'd have a little sheet, and then I'd remind him, stick it in his apartment so that he could like look at that once in a while and still not follow the instructions, of course, right? Because a lot of people don't, okay? So, but those are little ways to make it where you can have a little fun. And then there were some doctor's visits outside of the office. I would take my father and then take him out to his favorite lunch place afterwards or something, so that it was, he had to do this visit, and maybe the visit wasn't as pleasant, but then he had some positive thing he could do on the other end. And then you're also going to get some people, your parents or any people you're caregiving. There are some, what do we call them? My sister has a word of no can do people, negative people, right? They never want to do anything. Everything, like as soon as you propose, no, I don't want to do it. My father used to be very upbeat, but then he kind of turned into that person, okay? So I would suggest, and I learned it was better to get him to do outings with him. It's really helpful, but you have to find what rhythm works for the person, okay? If a person's dying, for instance, there are cancer patients, people that can't walk anymore, but they love to get in the wheelchair and go outside, especially in a season like this. Some people, they want to see nature, they want to see flowers, they want to go to their favorite cafe. There was the sweetest Sweetest old man connected to our center in New York, Freddie English, who went to Copan for years and years and years into his 80s. I was so impressed. And I remember I was getting ready for one of these long haul flights to Nepal, and I thought, well, if Freddie can do it, I'm so much younger, I can do it. He was amazing, and he lived on the East 60s in Manhattan. He was a great guy, but he really couldn't walk much anymore. And then ended up stuck in an apartment building where the elevator broke. He was on the 4th or 5th floor, and they didn't fix it for months because they wanted him out of the building. But he stayed. He stayed. They really wanted to get him out and renovate the apartment and charge 3 times as much. But he stayed, but he just needed help, and he couldn't do the stairs, and so he was like a shut-in for several months. Then they fixed it, and we got the local authorities. We had to file papers, and they fixed it. But his favorite thing was if I could come and with his cane help him walk around the corner to his favorite little lunch cafe, and he always insisted on buying me lunch, and then his favorite pastries were there, and we get a little bag. So there's some nice little things that don't take long to serve people, like to do things like that for people. So when my father I'd present an outing that I just thought would be good for him to get air. He was in his bedroom all day watching TV. I don't want to do that, was his first response. Always, I don't want to do that. And then I'd say, okay, well, but what if we just eat, I'd somehow manage to get him out, and sometimes I just do it in combination with a doctor's appointment then. And then he'd always go and he'd always enjoy. And he'd always be like, oh, I really like that place. And sometimes you just have to find the balance with people rather than forcing and fighting with them. You need to get out. You're in this room, the room smells, or, find more creative ways, because I've heard people say that as well, but find more creative ways. And then sometimes I know with caregivers, when the person is out at the medical procedure, when they're having an x-ray down the hall, when they're at the doctor's visit, or they had to go to the care center for an emergency for a couple of days, then we cleaned the room and turned the room over and made sure it was all ready and spick and span when they got back like that, because that can be an issue, especially caregiving elderly people. So what I want to talk about for us getting ready is some other things to think about with your mind. So this is from an older book. It's on my reading list. Christine Longacre, The 4 Tasks of Living and Dying. 4 Tasks of Living and Dying. And this is from her book, Facing Death and Finding Hope. Facing Death and Finding Hope. Again, just because a book is older, it doesn't mean it's not as relevant. Now, the only thing that's changed really with Christine's book is she documents the last year in the life of her husband who had leukemia and died of leukemia. And he was dying of leukemia at a time when the medical industry where she was living wasn't well versed in end of care life in a very respectful way in hospice work. So they had things like when they first gave the diagnosis to her and her husband, it was delivered by an intern or like a medical student that didn't deliver it very well, like where it should have had a doctor that met with them that explained in a much more compassionate way, and just the system wasn't very supportive. So it's a really good book. I found it very helpful book. And in here she has the 4 tasks of living and dying. So these are things you want to think about now. You want to get your stuff ready now. Number one, understanding and transforming suffering. Understanding and transforming suffering. This is actually so related to the Buddhist path. The Buddha's huge initiation of his path was to understand the cause of suffering and to dismantle that cause, to bring about an end to suffering. That's what he was interested in when he came face to face with suffering, and it startled him dramatically. Okay? So, thinking about the 4 noble truths, which is the first teaching that he gave, that number 1, there is suffering. Number 2, there's a cause to the suffering. Number 3, there's an end to the suffering. Number 4, there's a path to the end of the suffering. And that's our whole Buddhist path is contained in that. So for your own practice, understanding and transforming suffering, okay, meditate on the middle scope of the Lam Rim, which deals with all the different sufferings. We call it the 3, the 6, and the 8, is how the sufferings are divided. Meditate on the middle scope. And when I say middle scope, the Lam Rim is divided into a scope for a lower capable being's motivation, and then build on that middle capable being's motivation, higher capable being's motivation. Like that. So what does that mean? Well, the initial scope of the Lam Rim, what they call lower capable being, is they're very focused on, I'm terrified of what will come next, and that motivates me to practice. I'm terrified of the lower realms. I've heard you die, can die in incredible pain, and there's more suffering realms, and I don't want to come back like that, and I better practice. And I learn to take refuge as a sacred door through which the teaching is entered, and then I need to learn how to conduct myself, karma. So all those teachings are involved in that. And then build on that motivation, the middle scope motivation being is, but there's actually still suffering right now in my life, and I'm not satisfied with that. So I'd like to bring about an end to that suffering permanently and reach nirvana or liberation. And what that actually is a permanent cessation of all your mental afflictions. So what this scope deals with, the topics are 3 sufferings, 6 sufferings, 8 sufferings, and the 12 links of dependent arising that brings you to ignorance being the root cause of suffering. What does that mean? How to develop shine, the right meditative stabilization to be able to meditate on emptiness, to be able to cut that root. Okay? And then based on the higher scope motivation is, it's not just enough to relieve myself of the suffering, not just enough to relieve that, but all these beings are suffering. So if I can develop the good heart of bodhicitta, right, and develop a direct perception of emptiness, the nature of reality, I can become enlightened, become a Buddha. Buddha simply means in Sanskrit, fully awakened being. And from that space, I'm unlimited in helping all living beings. So the bigger Mahayana motivation, like that. So what I'm saying is meditate on those 3, 6, and 8 sufferings. Understand, and when I say meditate, if I say to you loneliness, we're all aware of what loneliness is. We've all probably been lonely at one point or another in our lives. But you really want to meditate deeply on it. Calling up those moments in your life. You didn't have a friend. You really felt alienated at work. Didn't have anybody to turn to, anybody to lean on. Even look in your own relationships how lonely you are, like that. Sometimes you're in a pool swirling around with lots of people and you feel incredibly lonely, like that. Not connecting with anybody in that kind of situation. There's lonelinesses of uncertainty. How many of us need to know how things are going to be? You need to know that. How's that going for you, right? But there are people that they need, I need this, I need to know when you're going to be, and well, I don't know. Things are changeable. I mean, certainly we have practical plans. We need to know what time this class starts, what time it ends, of course. Okay? But uncertainty, the only thing you can count on is change. The rest of it, you don't know, right? Uncertainty, how about dissatisfaction? How many people suffer from that? And you look at your own mind. Each thing, and look at all of our fashion, technology. I mentioned last night, renovating your kitchen again, right? Because you're not satisfied with those cabinets. Because they invented a new one, and that's the new one. This is the new color now that's out, right? Fashion industry knows that too well, okay? So understanding and transforming suffering. So this involves coming to accept suffering and problems are a natural, inevitable part of life, okay? And then you learn ways of better coping mechanisms for your problems. That's reality. That's a balanced reality. There's going to be problems in some sort. Learning, so you start first practice with the smaller problems, right? Don't start with something overwhelming. Start with something reasonable, okay? And then when you get better with that, then you go on to something bigger in your life. So you're exercising this automatically. So when death comes, you might see it as a big problem, but maybe you go, okay, I knew about this transition. I knew this was coming. Dealing with the other things calmly. But you see, we all know people that get overly dramatic over some little thing, right? Is it worth it? You know, your friend cancels lunch plans with you at the last minute. Some people get bent out of shape. Some people can't handle it. So that's a pretty small thing, okay? So then if that doesn't work for you, you need to practice with that and go, what's really going to happen? Now, if they do it 3 times, then I might have a very compassionate conversation with them. They want to plan again lunch and just say, you know, I'd love to have lunch with you. I'm really looking forward to it. And I looked forward to it the last 3 times, but you canceled at the last minute, and I'm really busy too. So I'd love to be able to do something where I know that we're going to meet this time, because I'm holding that time for you, and I've got other things that I could schedule. So we can certainly address it, but calmly, compassionately. That. So we want to work on those small things. Understand samsara's nature. How's that going for you? When things break, things don't work out, you get sick. Yeah, this was something going on, it still goes on a bit with COVID, okay? So when we started moving around after COVID, late 2021, a lot of people started, things were changing. 2022, we entered. And then the incidences started going down, and we'd have little fluctuations around the winter, and when people were indoors, and it got a little better, and came into 2023. Less masks. I noticed in 2023, me and 2 other people on the plane are the only ones with masks on. Nobody masks anymore. You know, now we don't really think about it. You go into a restaurant, how many people are hand sanitizing? A lot. We forget. I still have it in the car, but I forget now. And then I go, oh yeah, maybe I should, you know. But less people are getting it, so we're a little bit more relaxed, like that. So what I found was, this may be one of you that I'm speaking to, so you're flying across country to a wedding you've been waiting for. And then a couple days before the wedding, you got a scratchy throat. And then somehow you decide to test, and you test positive for COVID. What do? Get on the plane? I knew people that got on the plane. Several people that got on the plane. I also knew people who didn't test and got on the plane. They wore a mask, and then there were people I knew that had all these symptoms, didn't test, and they'd say proudly, I never had COVID. You know, it's just funny where people go to with different things, but there's things like that. So, you know, it's tricky. It's tricky knowing samsara and how people are you know, I was just so concerned about giving it to someone else if I got it. A lot of people didn't have symptoms at all. You didn't know. So it was just such a tricky part for everybody of what was happening. Fortunately, it's hopefully let's have it reducing more and more and more, and it seems to be affecting less people in a horrible way like that. But it's just for the very susceptible that can really, really have trouble with these illnesses. But they also had trouble with the cold. If they get a cold, if they get a flu, it can be very dangerous for susceptible people. So understand transforming, so that middle scope is all about the causes of samsara. Understanding it is a suffering realm. And what samsara means, most of you are familiar with this. What does samsara mean? Sanskrit term. What does it mean? To cycle. Yes, thank you. To cycle, to turn. That's all it means, to turn. It doesn't mean suffering, it means, but what are we turning through? Birth, old age, sickness, death, all of that is suffering. Doesn't mean there's not beauty in birth and death, okay? But it's suffering. Ask anybody in here who's had a baby. Suffering, right? Suffering. There was, I told you this before in another class when I was here. So I lived in San Francisco for some years, and I took the bus to work. And there was street art on the buses inside. They had poems, paintings, and one of them was from a poet, and it said, birthin' is hard and dyin' is mean, so best to get yourself some lovin' in between. I couldn't agree more, right? And even to deal with all of those experiences of samsara with love is the solution to it all, really. Pure unconditional love, like that. So, but you need to understand samsara's nature. Samsara's nature. You are not going to find happiness in samsara. And in our culture, and being privileged Westerners, which is most of us here, is we are continually fooling ourselves. You know, we've got comfortable homes, comfortable beds, comfortable cars, comfortable infrastructure. We can go into the supermarket and see the most beautiful display of foods, healthy foods that you have complete access to at any time. Hopefully, you've got food, clothing, and shelter. All these incredible things, so we get duped that there's going to be happiness here. And there is this temporal happiness. There are these little moments when we go, you know, the ice cream cone tastes really good. Okay? So you have to be very skillful to really meditate on the sufferings, you know, understand how it will manifest, and look at the end of your life. It's coming soon to a body near yours, right? There should be a marquee that I wake up with every morning, death, right? So we really have to understand samsara's nature, which is that middle scope of the Lam Rim, okay? I think I told you this before in here. Samsara, the word. So you remember in the 90s, I'm guessing, kind of dating myself now, in the 90s, one cosmetic company invented a new fragrance. You remember this? And it was called Samsara. Okay? That's how their advertisements were. Samsara. You know, it's a sexy word, they thought. So I was living at a center, then we didn't get TV, but I'd visit my parents and I saw a couple of the ads. And it's a woman, she's a beautiful woman floating across the screen with a magenta scarf blowing in the wind, and you'd see, you know, samsara. And then they'd have the scent. Do you want to buy more? We thought it was a riot as Buddhists. Who needs more of that? And they're selling it for a lot of money. It was so funny. So anyway, you can have fun with that. So that's samsara's nature. We get duped by it very much, that it's the beautiful perfume and the lovely young woman moving across the screen. You know, really poke at its nature. Really look at, and just look for a thing. If you're a clothes person, go in your closet, look at your clothes. When you first saw that incredible navy fleece vest, how wonderful it looked on the shelf, and you needed it, and you really wanted it, and it was a special kind, and it was that expensive one, and you really wanted to have it, and now look at it, 15 years later. How does it look now? Well, that was all there in the beginning, right? But all that shiny and all that luster, and it wears off of us, especially. So you have your beautiful young partner you meet, and you know, and then and I just went through a thing. The first funeral I went to a couple weeks ago, my friend's father, he was a lovely guy. And he had one wife for 25 years, and then she passed away, unfortunately, lovely woman, and he remarried. And he remarried a different woman, very different than his first wife, and she was a very challenging person. I think very unhappy in herself. And so they went along for a long time. They were together as well, even longer than his first wife, right? But in the end, the last 2 years, he got a very bad type of cancer. He was being treated. He was just a trooper through all the treatment, all the pain, all the suffering, and she just couldn't handle it. But it wasn't her going through it. But it was always about her. And it was so difficult dealing with somebody like that so you have to kind of look at, and so suddenly when things went south with him, like this is her great relationship she always liked, and all the trips they did, and all the things they had, and so many advantages in their lives, and then when things got tough for him, and he's in a hospital bed, and needing this and that, she doesn't really want to show up, doesn't really want to be there. And so it's like, sorry, in sickness and in health, right? You take a vow, it's really, you gotta be there, definitely be there for your partners in the tough times too. It's really, really important. Number 2 of the 4 tasks. Number 2, making a connection, healing relationships, and letting go. Making a connection, healing relationships, and letting go. Okay? So this means now communicating openly communicating compassionately, skillfully with all the people in your lives, whether they're intimate people with you, whether it's a colleague, whether it's just somebody at the store, okay? But especially those most intimate, family and friends, okay? To clear up any unresolved problems that you have with any of them. Practice that now, okay? So that you're unfettered at the time of death, unfettered at the time of death. Really, really important. And especially what does happen is those closest to us, I don't know if you fall into this pull, those closest to us sometimes get our most special treatment, right? Right? I've seen couples, many couples I know, couples that I'm close with, when I'm staying with them, or, I'll leave David and Elise out of this now, but no. When I stay with people, and it could be my brother and sister-in-law, or my sister and her husband, sister and brother-in-law, and different people, you get into things, but because you're so intimate and close with this person, your spouse, your partner, right? I've seen them snapping at each other. Like you take liberties. Now, not everybody does that. Some people are incredibly respectful, right? And they've set up a kind of condition that we're going to treat each other respectfully, but some people don't have that, and it's just bickering and backfighting and backbiting and and it's interesting just to see this person dearest to you that gets the worst treatment. Sometimes it's one-sided, where it's one person just verbally bashing the others constantly, and they can do nothing right like that. So you do need to fix it. You need to own it if it's you doing the bashing. You need to stand up if you're getting bashed. It's not okay for them to do it. It's not good for them. Think about that. It's not good for them. But find a way. It's very hard. You may need to get allies. You may need to get your kids, friends, close friends, to kind of say, you can't treat her like that anymore. That's not where you want to be. I know people have all their own, interesting things. How actively are you listening to your dear partner or your kids or those people close to you? Active listening, which is about closing this thing, active listening. That can be hard for some people. And can you make that as an offering to your loved one? So respectful. Can you make it as an offering to your loved one? And I've told this story before. When I lived at Milarepa Center, we had a manager at the center, a very skilled woman. She became a friend. She was really great. But she kind of had a victim personality at times. And then she said to me that she felt I didn't listen to her and that I only told her when she was doing something wrong. And I was kind of the manager, the director, basically. So I took that to heart, and I was like, okay, I respect her, and I've got to look at that. And I said, I'm so sorry if I'm doing that. And I really, over the next month, was really watching that to see, okay? And there was some truth in it, but not entirely, because I was very skillful at giving her credit. But what happened is, because of her personality, she couldn't hear any of it. So I noticed when I'd give her a compliment, she wouldn't even make eye contact with me until I had to say, hello, this was great what you did. Are you hearing me? So we kind of did this work together, and then I realized I wasn't listening to her that well at times. We both realized we weren't listening to each other. So I said, okay, this next month, that's going to be my focus. So we were in the kitchen, country kitchen, big wooden table in the middle, and she's washing dishes with her back to me, and I'm cooking. And the table's in the middle. I'm cooking something, and she's talking to me about something I thought was important. So she's talking and talking and talking, and I thought, this sounds really important. I'm going to stop cooking. I turned the burner off. I turned around onto the counter, and I was watching her back, and she's just doing the dishes, not knowing I'm looking, but I was really just like, I'm just going to focus on what she's saying right now. I don't need to do anything else. Can you ever do that? We're always multitasking. I just stopped. That was my offering. I'm like, I just want to listen to her. So I'm listening, and she stopped, and she finished doing the dishes and dried her hands, and she turned around and she saw me like this, and she turned around and then she went, what's wrong? And I said, I'm just listening to you. And she was so touched by that. She was so moved. I said, it sounds really important when you're talking about it. Let's talk about it. I was just listening. And that sounds awful what you're going through, what happened, And So she was very moved. So that's a great offering you can give somebody. Sometimes we need help and we need workshops in how to communicate well. We think we're doing it well, but we're really not. A lot of people think communication is only about how I express myself. It's also about listening. That. So healing relationships, what needs to be healed of relationships? Now, there's situations of great abuse that has happened to some people in their lives. You have to make a choice if you want to heal that. If the person's still alive, there's ways you can go about that with the person. But you need clear boundaries. You may need other people to be there with you when you discuss with them or meet with them. You may want to do an intervention and get professional help if they're agreeing to participate with you in therapy or something like that to heal what happened. And you can use, we were just talking at lunch, Archbishop Desmond Tutu's The Book of Forgiving that he wrote with his daughter is very helpful. And there's many books on forgiveness. I would highly recommend things like that to see if you can ultimately forgive the person for the abuse, things like that. And you can choose then, as part of the forgiveness, whether you feel you can renew the relationship and carry on a new relationship. It's got to be new. It's not going to continue with the abuse. That's over. You can state that to them. Okay? Or sometimes you realize they're not able to stop the abuse and you need to be away from them and you're not going to renew. You're not going to continue the relationship. That's also okay. You can give yourself permission for that because the person is not well enough to have a decent relationship with you. Right? And you can also revisit it in another year or two to see whether they want to try something different like that. But it's really important to try to heal those relationships. Better to do it now when you're in control of your mind or somewhat control, and maybe they're still alive. And the other thing I would do is you can also do this work with people who have passed away. People who have passed away, or people you do not see anymore, people who don't want to talk to you anymore. You can actually put them in front of you in a meditation, visualize them, and you can do this with them. Okay? Forgiveness is a process. It takes time. You may forgive, and you may wake up in the morning and realize, I need to do it again. Perfectly fine. It takes time to do that. So check, am I communicating openly, compassionately, but it also says skillfully. You don't just blurt things out to people suddenly because I need to fix things. Maybe they're not ready. I have somebody in my life, and this is somebody very close to me, right? Their method of wanting to get to the root of things is just not to talk about it. They don't want to go in there. I like to go in there and get it resolved and discuss what happened, and that's horrible for them. That's like the worst thing. And for me, one of the worst things is just push it under the carpet. So here we are at this impasse, two completely different modes. So I voiced it to the person, these things coming up, like this is how I like to deal with it. I respect that you have a different way, but for our relationship, I think we need to find a compromise. And I've said I don't know what that's going to look like yet, but I'm really interested in finding a compromise so that we can work through this. It's not a major thing. It's just kind of old stuff that's come up with a deep family member very close to me that kind of surfaces at times. And so I really want to do this work, and she's kind of terrified. It's just the way she lives her life and stuff. So what I notice is just from my voicing that and letting go, because that's the next step, letting go, just from voicing it and letting go, because I can't push her to be somebody she's not, right? She started to come into the compromise. Like she'll start to say, and I notice her trying to change her behavior based on things I said. So she's kind of meeting me halfway. And that's good enough for me. That's good, because I don't want to push her into a place that's too uncomfortable for her. So just from sometimes saying, well, kind of here's what I need, to go forward in a good way. Not that I'm needy, but here's what I need in order for us to, I respect where you are, but maybe we can find a way, So it's been very different now. Very different now. So letting go. How's your letting go? Because when you're in the ultimate transition, dying, you need to let go of it all. You need to let go of it all. Right? And not even considering, oh, my meditation on emptiness. If that's the last thing, that's the last thing you're holding on to. Right? But everything else has got to go. And any time you are going to be hanging on at the end, it's going to cause you tremendous suffering. You know, just even to a concept, your identity, like that, and just conceptual things. And I do know one Lama of mine, when he was dying at Kopan some years ago, and he was a wonderful being and practitioner, and his attendant was telling me the last few hours what happened. And he said, and then the Lama said to the attendant, so now I should be focusing on emptiness. Like he was able to speak a little bit and actually said that, and I kind of thought, I mean, it was helpful for me to hear that because I thought, okay, could I be voicing that in my dying moments? And voicing it out loud, which gave me kind of hope. I thought if even this Lama was thinking about that dying and naming it and trying to stay focused there, you know, I thought that it gives me hope. It gives me kind of confidence or aspiration that, you know, I can remind myself of that when I'm dying. Or you have friends around you that remind you of that, remind you what to think about, like that. You could just be reminding someone to take refuge in that time. You could be reminding them to think about Tonglen or stuff like that. Number 3, tasks of living and dying. Number 3, cultivating a spiritual practice. Cultivating a spiritual practice. We've been talking about this, okay? So again, I have a little cheat sheet of how do I get a consistent practice going from the very beginning, slowly, just the very beginning steps, okay? Some of it I've taught in courses. You've heard it in other courses by other people. Go over those courses. There's one, Discovering Buddhism, Establishing a Daily Practice, like that. Get people started if you're newer. If you have a practice going, great. What do you need to change up in it a little bit? Because practice can change over time. It gets stale. It plateaus. So I noticed I moved one of my practices earlier in my practice in the day. That works better now. I was doing it later in the day. It didn't work as well. So perfectly fine to do things like that. You can compare with other people at your level. You can discuss different things. But make sure that you're kind of continuing the progress, that it's not stagnated out where it's becoming really dull and dry. Nothing's happening for you, right? Oh, we will take a break soon. Let me just finish this last one. And there's a lot more I'll say also about cultivating a spiritual practice, but when we get a little later and woohoo! Oh, you have one. I was just going to throw one at you. Okay. Number 4, fourth task. Again, cultivating a spiritual practice as well. When you're a busy working person with kids, family, and keep it reasonable, but something that is done every day is going to have much more benefit for you than the weekend warrior. We know that with exercise, right? There's people that don't do anything all week, and then they go to the gym for 5 hours, and then they're really tired, and then they eat a lot because they come home from the gym, and they're... So a little bit every day, I find, goes long. It's in my mind every day. I wake up, I have this motivation, I'm doing this thing, I sit at my place, I do my water bowls or light a candle, whatever you're doing. Well, it feels like it makes more consistent imprints in your consciousness. Are you okay? Yeah. So that's so essential, that spiritual practice, to cultivate that. And many different levels of it. Can you combine understanding how to do the practice? What about doing some preliminary practices, right? They clear away obstacles to the practice. What about engaging in a certain course? Get into a course of study, very helpful. Reading a certain book you wanted to read, spiritual book, right? Think about adding a little retreat component. Can I actually take myself away to a retreat center for a weekend and get more into the Lamrim and really understand this book and outline it myself. That's just what I'm going to do this weekend. Keep it simple while I do some practice. That's how I started, very slowly adding, understanding, reading this book, adding a little bit more, lengthening some retreat time. Maybe I can go to this group retreat for a week and get a little bit more information. That's how it unwinds for us. But you do need to make the effort. The retreat center, if you go on your own, it doesn't need to be a Buddhist center. If you don't know any Buddhist retreat centers near here, okay? So when I was living with my dad, there weren't any Buddhist retreat centers there in that area, but I found this incredible Franciscan Catholic center that I went to, and they had a little hermitage, and they had these little cabins. And it was all contained, and all I had to do was bring my food. One room, little balcony, beautiful little wooded area with lovely walks, and I booked it out for 10 days. It was perfect. Wasn't expensive at all. Like that. And they were very supportive. I met nuns there. They were very happy I was there, like that. And at one point I was exploring, because I wasn't sure I was going to live with my dad, so I was exploring, could I rent a cheap room from them? Because they weren't full. And just the Catholics are having trouble getting nuns into the younger nuns to come. So some of them are closing and they're merging, and I talked to the nuns there, I talked to the director, and it was just like running one of our centers. She was the director of this place, and they had an adult retreat center attached to it, and that's how they would make some income. It was a very nice place, beautiful place. So I talked to her and I said, would you consider renting a room? Would I have to do your practices? And she goes, oh no, we'd consider that. And what happens is I couldn't rent it year round because they rent them out for the adult retreat activities. So she said, we don't have a room for year round, but we'd love to have you here. And it's really hard for Christians and Catholics to really get that we are non-theistic Buddhism. We don't have a God, the creator. So she said to me, yeah, it's perfectly fine. We'd love to have you here because, God is God, right? And I was a little bit like, what do you mean by God? Because, it's just like, they couldn't. I know Pope John Paul II, they said, was very close with His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And they were often seated together at interfaith programs. And they were both people that were referred to as Your Holiness, right? And they were very good friends. And the only thing that I had heard that Pope John Paul II, the issue he had was he couldn't get around that His Holiness didn't have a belief in God, a God the Creator, separate God the Creator. It was like fundamental thing about Christianity, is a God the Creator, monotheistic religions like that, Judeo-Christian religions or Abrahamic, traditions they talk about. So cultivating that practice. Now here's number 4. This is almost the most essential in some ways. Finding meaning in life. Finding meaning in life, okay? So not having a clear idea as to what's the purpose and meaning of our existence can be a great source of unhappiness and despair as we grow older, okay? Especially as you grow closer to death, okay? So what's important is for each of you from this moment onwards, if you haven't sorted it yet, okay, figure out what lights you up from inside, okay, and then just live your life in that way. I'm not kidding. You have to find meaning. You have to find. A lot of us are on a treadmill and we're just going through the motions. Well, I thought I was supposed to get married and have kids, and I did that, and then I bought a house. And then I got a car, and I have a couple vacations once in a while. Americans don't get enough time off. It's tragic. We were just talking about Amsterdam, where I spent last autumn teaching for our center. It's different over there. It's better. Much better in Europe, in certain countries in Europe, much better. And Americans that don't travel don't have any concept. They get 4 to 6 weeks off a year. They pay $150 a month for the best health care in the world. There's a bigger safety net there. Things are taken care of. You're older. There's different systems like that in place. Scandinavia, yeah, do they pay through taxes? Scandinavians have a lot of high taxes. I would be happy to pay higher taxes knowing that my entire country was taken care of. You sleep better at night. Like that. The States, we don't know. Like some people are doing well, right? A lot of people are struggling. And those people that are struggling, some of them are really angry and they own guns. Right? Think about all the mass shooters. Think about that mindset of these mass shooters. They have profiles of them. Many of them are similar. Okay? Younger, disenfranchised white men. They're angry, they're lost, and a lot of mentally ill. It's not like you don't have that in Europe, but you don't hear about all these mass shootings in Europe. There are occasionally, not like in the United States. Right? People are stressed. That's where it comes from. They're stressed. Can't take care of themselves, can't pay their bills. It doesn't need to be that way. So sad. It's really a hard one. It's really a hard one. So then I get to Amsterdam, our center, very sweet city center there, but so, we at times talk politics a little bit, countries, they know what's going on here, right? And they did elect a right-wing leader last autumn, but then he couldn't put a government together, right? But anyway, they talked, so then we talk about different things, and then they said to me, so we wonder, we have a question, your culture, so you have all these mass shootings, and I said, yeah. And they said, so why don't you get rid of the guns? Like I was a little bit like, what an idea! Like that's never occurred to us, right? But the thing is, like England had a mass shooting in the 50s. They banned guns, and that was really the last mass shooting they had like that. The statistics are there, right? So I'm probably preaching to the choir, but it's quite sad, and we're losing control of the country. We're really losing scope of trying to win it back. But anything's possible because everything's empty. Okay? But it is interesting. So finding meaning in life, there's so many people that have lost meaning, don't know what that is. What fills you up inside? What lights you up? But I'm not talking about superficial happiness, like you go to the beach, isn't that great? I'm talking about, when you are in sync with something. For me, a lot of it is around helping people. Check it out if that's part of your meaning formula. To me, that's the crux of it. But you have to check yourself. What is it that really gets you going, that really you feel, this is my place in the universe, this is incredible, oh my gosh, I'm really, this is what I need to be doing. Find that thing right now. But for me, the magic part is, it's usually about helping others. There's something involved with helping outside of your own realm, like that. Find that thing and then just drive along that path. Take it to the moon and back. Take it to enlightenment. It's so essential. I meet people, they haven't really found that, feeling victimized, blaming everything external. It's another thing Buddhism cures you of. And we were talking about, Venerable Rabina was saying, karma takes care. Karma's a situation. You don't need to worry about that person that appears to be harming you and you want to get them back and you want them to fail and everything. Let all that go. Karma will take care of it. You need to take care of your own mind because it's my mind that created this situation. So if I fix my mind, that person goes away. And it's not that the person goes away, that situation arising will go away, causing somebody to be unkind to me, causing someone to harm my family. Buddhism says it comes from the mind. You have to check up on that. Where does your suffering come from? Please check. So it's so important to find that meaning in life, where some people limp along into old age, miserable. I asked one person once, I know very close in my life, not happy. And I'm just like, if you could do anything right now, at all, regardless of your financial scene, if you could do anything at all, what would you do? They didn't know. They had no idea. And I'd said, what makes you really happy? They had no idea. So figure it out. Look now and find out what it is now. Don't wait any longer. You don't have to wait any longer. Okay. We're going to take a break, but any questions right now on anything I mentioned? Anybody online? Okay. We're going to take let's just take a 10-minute break, because then we just got 20 minutes, okay? 10-minute break. Again, no blah, blah. Think about, no wasted speech. How are you living these 4 tasks of living and dying? Talk to somebody, meet somebody new. What is working for you? What's not working for you? What do you need to kind of step up with your practice? What do you need help with in your practice? We can help each other. There's some very experienced practitioners here. There's some very new people. Okay, 10 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, everyone, this is your 2-minute warning. 2 minutes. Wrap it up. Okay, we've got it at 3:40 now, so if everyone could come in and get seated, we'll get started back up for the last part.
And sometimes think about when sometimes people want to ask an individual question, that's fine to me, but sometimes it'll benefit everybody, when you ask the question. So we just had a good question on, and we're going to get more into this tomorrow, we'll talk about, is why do they say that the mind at the death time, the imprints that are happening at that time can leave a deeper imprint, that have more of an effect on the death, the Bardo experience, and your next rebirth. So the mind at the death time, closer to the death time. So this person was saying to me, so you can be, a real jerk your whole life and have this incredibly virtuous thought or practice right at the death time, and it has a bigger effect on you, like that. And the same thing, you can have, a really wonderful life and then have some really negative thoughts at the very end. Now, all of that karma affects your future rebirth, all of it. It's not that it goes away, the rest of it, okay? But apparently, at the death time, the mind goes into a more subtle state because the gross thoughts are really not operating as much anymore. And it's hard to understand what is that more subtle state. So the mind operates on a gross level, a subtle level, and a most subtle level, as I mentioned before, okay? So it's hard to understand. Gross level is we have thoughts. You're right now maybe acknowledging, I'm sitting in the room. That's a gross thought. You track the thought, you see it, you experience it, you're watching lots of thoughts bubble up, gross mind, okay? Subtle mind. So in a finger snap, Tibetan Buddhists say, in a finger snap, Tibetan Buddhism says, there's what is it, 56 fluctuations of the consciousness. In that, 56 movements of the mind. In that, you're not going to catch that, okay? But karma's still operating there. When you're on long retreat, sometimes you get a sense of those subtle fluctuations, okay? But your mind has to be in retreat, sometimes your mind is in a little bit more subtle state, has that ability. So you get a little taste of that, okay? But normally, so what they're saying is, at the death time, your mind becomes a little bit more subtle. Subtle consciousness is what's more arising. And so I just think what I've read and what I've heard is, so any imprints made at that time can go a little more deeply to affect, but all the other karma's still there, operating. So again, that's why we really want to do good work at the death time, be habituated to think good thoughts, have prayers going on, have all of that set up for ourselves so that we can have every positive experience at the death time operating like that. Really effective. Okay. So I want to go on a little bit. I think we've talked about lower realms, and I think I've explained this, but I just want to have a review, and if it's new for some people, there are 6 realms of rebirth you can take after you die. So you transition in the bardo, you go into this in-between state, okay? And then up to 49 days, you're circling around of what karmic condition is going to cause you, what finally manifests. How does it manifest and get you into the next rebirth? I have no idea. I've asked that question many times. How does even karma imprint in the consciousness? I've asked that question. Never received an answer like that. So, but you want to think about you're in this period traversing, just like we're in life, going through different experiences, okay? And then you're in this situation somewhat uncontrollably for an ordinary person, okay? And a certain karmic condition comes together at 49 days, boom, manifests, and you're off in the next rebirth, okay? How can they manifest? What are the 6 realms of cyclic existence? Anybody? Let's start at the top, okay? Okay, there's 2 God realms, by the way. 2 God realms, okay? There is a hedonistic God realms at the very top. Hedonistic God realm. Okay, now this is a problem in the God realm. You experience too much pleasure, so you use up a lot of merit. Not helpful to use up that much pleasure. Does it feel good in the hedonistic God realm? Absolutely. Okay? When I first got into Buddhism, I was like, that's where I'm headed. I want to go there. Right? Not helpful to go there. It's not optimum for getting enlightened because you use up too much merit. And there's an ancient story of, I can't remember, was it Master Shantideva or somebody went to the God realm to rescue a student that ended up in the hedonistic God realm. And the hedonistic God realm was having this kind of, I don't know, was it some kind of orgy, just, having a cup of tea. And the teacher came in the back of the room and walked by. And this was a teacher who was really close with him. Because the guy was in this hedonistic God realm, all he could do, he recognized the teacher as he was having his cup of tea, all he could do was gesture to the teacher like this with his pinky, because he was just too blissed out. So again, there's no condition to practice Dharma because why? Everything's so pleasurable. Okay? Next God realm down, jealous God realm. So they have a pretty good situation. But they're always looking at the hedonistic God realm, wanting to be there and fighting with them and hating them and warring with them. So it's not very, and then they use up a lot of merit because they have a very pleasant situation on another level. Then we come to us, the humans. Okay? Optimum rebirth for getting enlightened. We've got the best situation right now. The reason is you have a balance of leisure and suffering. Leisure and suffering. You need the leisure to practice Dharma. You need the leisure to set up, to come to, help a center, come to a center, make offerings to the center if you like, engage in the center's courses, be able to go home, set up a meditation space, all these things, to do retreat, to visit interesting Buddhist countries, go on Buddhist pilgrimage, all of those things. So you need leisure to do it. We have that. We have that, okay? Then we have suffering. Suffering motivates you to practice. Look at the world right now. I like make prayers many times. Can I go to a world system? You have to be very specific, though. Be careful for what you wish for. Go to a world system where the word war doesn't even exist, where there isn't conflict and hostility and hatred and delusions like that. So you look at our planet, there's a lot of suffering on the planet. So you look at the suffering, you want to fix things, you want to help people, and you realize you're limited as a human. And if you find a path, and a path that awakens you to ultimate freedom, then you have every ability to help beings. And you're omniscient, so you know every way to help them. You know exactly what will happen. So you have no more fear, no more obstacles. Like that's fantastic. So perfect situation, human being. We can come, that's what we want to come back in, like that. Unless you can get yourself quickly to a pure realm. Pure realm is not a God realm, but it's like a Buddhist heaven where you have every perfect condition to practice Dharma, like that. And sometimes it seemed like in an ability to serve some of our residential retreat centers where I was living, we created a little bit of a pure realm there at times. We were just practicing Dharma all the time. It was just a continual, the lamas were visiting us, our centers all the time, staying for like a month. We were doing all these very high-level practices, retreats, getting initiations. It was amazing in the 90s what was going on in California at the time, and I really value that time. And we can create that again, anywhere. You can create it here, like that. You have some beautiful things happen at this center, like that. So you can keep growing that. The fact you got this beautiful center, you have a beautiful stupa, you've hosted Light of the Path retreats. You've done some phenomenal things at this center, like that. And then somebody said to me, and you're gonna expand the kitchen, and you're gonna do this, and then somebody's like, and we have all the money to do that, and we have all the money. It's like fantastic. The center's always struggling financially. We want to do this. We'll make plans. We'll raise the money, but we don't have the money for it yet. So you have many things, many good advantages here. Okay. Then we have 3 lower realms. What are the 3 lower realms? Let's start at the top. Animal. Next realm? Hungry ghost. Next realm? Hell realms. Okay. So animal rebirth. What do you think about that? You like it? Okay. But so Geshe Gelik told me, I love Geshe Gelik, and so we hosted him, 2010, long time ago, 2009, I can't remember. He came up to Milarepa Center in Vermont, northern Vermont, when I was the director there. And we invited him for a weekend, and he was excited, and he came in the winter. Wanted to come in the winter, and I had to brief him, and I'm like, Geshe, it's really cold here, and please bring warm clothes and things. And then we got our first big snow. He was very excited, and he really wanted to go to Canada. So we were an hour from Canada, and we took him to Canada for the day. There were just 4 of us, Geshe and 3 of us. We drove to Canada for the day. We had a wonderful day, but we happened to drive to Canada during the first winter blizzard of the year. And it was really an event because we headed out not really knowing, and it just got worse and worse. But it was funny. We had a good car, but it was just coming down, and he loved it, and it was very fun. But it was a very raw day weather-wise. And we had a really nice time. And then Geshe said to me when he got to the center, I said he had been at Kadamba Center 11 years at that point. And then I said, Geshe, it must have been very hard for you when you first came to North Carolina, because I've been to the monasteries in India, and it's very, very different, as some of you know that you visited where he lives. So I said, it must have been very hard for you at first in North Carolina, different culture. And he was living with, a couple and meeting people, and then he said to me, he said, oh yes. And then he said, a student, maybe I'm breaching confidences here, I'm not sure, it could be one of you, And he said a student came to him in the beginning and said, Geshe, could you please give me mantras that I can recite so that I can come back as a cat? Right? You've heard this story, right? So, and Geshe looked at me, and then he said, with his eyes wide open, and he said, "Can you imagine?" Like like this. Like for him, it was just they hear that we are barbaric, is what the Tibetans hear when they come. I've heard this story before, that we are barbaric, and so he said to me, "Can you imagine?" Like they want. So that what happens is people see their pets. You have to go to work. Your pet's lounging in the sun, licking herself, everything taken care of. Okay, you have to meditate on the animal realms, okay? You really have to be your cat. Walk around 15, 20 minutes, look out through your cat's eyes. What is their existence about? I don't see any animals in this room. They cannot practice Dharma, I'm sorry. I don't care how smart your dog or cat is. I've taken animals around stupas. I've seen them walk themselves around stupas. Why? Because they were following me, attached to me. They don't understand stupa. There's a story of the flies that landed on the kaka that went around the stupa in the water, and that created a good cause for them. It does have an effect. So you can say mantras to your animals. You can have text playing for them during the day, looping on a, fantastic. That's the best we can do with our animals. Service animals are at the very top of the animal realm. Not by choice, necessarily. The very top of the animal realm. They are intelligent, they are trained, but most animals live in the sea, and the insect realm is vast, right? So you have to really understand the animal realm. It's full of suffering, it's full of eating, being eaten, being hunted, dog eat dog, going to the bathroom, sleeping, and making more animals. That's the animal realm. Look what cats eat. How do you think, how do you feel about that? I think it's disgusting what they eat. It smells, you know, and the way they eat. They spread it all over the place. I mean, I just lived with 2 cats in California for a couple months. They were wonderful cats. Ugh, right? Their hair is everywhere. You wake up with their hair in your mouth, right? And cat, you know, dogs are companionable, and dogs are companionable. Cats have staff, right? So you really want to think about, but you have to do meditations on the animal realm to convince yourself, what is it really like? Be an animal in the wild. And so the animal realm's not really a helpful place we want to be, created by a lot of laziness in life and a lot of sleeping during the day, unless you have a night shift job. Now, no, I'm not talking about a little power nap, but I'm talking about that, okay, so animal realm. Hungry ghost realm. We could come back, hungry ghost realm, also called craving spirit. Craving spirit, created by intense attachment and desire. People who are never satisfied create the cause for the grasping, hence grasping, craving, like that. So just think about dismantling that in your mind. We know people like that. The interesting thing about pretas is they can practice Dharma, they can hear Dharma. And we can't really interact with them, we don't see them, but we're saying on the Tibetan plateau, in ancient days, nomads, they would see sparks in the distance and talk to the pretas that were living there. Because the pretas have swollen bellies, they're starving all the time, they have skinny little necks, they look like starving people. They have big eyes, emaciated skulls, they have obstructions in their throat so the whole food doesn't fit down. Their karma is when they come to a river that we would see water for drinking as a human, they see pus and blood. That's what their karma creates. Again, the mind creates the external reality. Their limbs spark, so that's why the Tibetans and nomads would say there must be pretas out there. They'd see sparks out on the plateau. I don't know, I can't say, but they actually do exist somewhere like that, wandering endlessly to get one little piece of snot. So as a very effective Lama Zopa Rinpoche, always never wasting his words, maybe it was at Light of the Path, no, maybe at Kopan, he was giving an explanation to the Preta realm. So Rinpoche, obviously, to really get into our minds, to soak our minds in what it's like to be a Preta. Because you can say hungry ghost, and you can say, oh, they're starving, but it's very superficial for us. We don't really experience that or know what it is until you meditate a little more on it. And so Rinpoche kept talking about, this one Preta who wandered for 50,000 years or 50,000 eons, right? And basically to find food for her starving children, and basically came across, and this is the way Rinpoche said it, found a little dried piece of snot. That's how Rinpoche would say, right? And then Rinpoche proceeded to repeat that word snot, dried little piece of snot, over and over and over and over, until I was so disgusted. But so it's effective, where you realize, I can't come back in that realm. Oh my God. So it's effective the way he was doing that. And several of us walked out of the teaching later and were like that's their whole existence. It's a whole existence. One time a friend of mine said, we were sitting in India, there was a pile of kalkaka, there were all these flies on it. Right? For them it's honey, nectar. And then we were sitting there talking about the animal realm, and then he said, yeah, I think that's the way the lamas look at us, like flies on caca. We're so attached to our stuff. I need this. I want this. This is so great. This is so great. I just got my new phone. It's so great. It does, and they're looking, they're like, you can have that, or you can have everything free. Have your mind completely free, unfettered, no fears, no pain, no suffering. So what do you want? You want your caca, or do you want freedom? But it's like that. So it's very effective for the mind. Preta realm, okay? And then the hell realms. The Lam Rim, the more extensive Lam Rim books, discuss in depth the different kinds of hell realms, like that. So if you want to really, instead of watching your horror movie one night, just tune into those pages, and you can read about the real suffering, to some degree to scare us, but to motivate us to practice, and also to generate intense compassion. To generate compassion for these beings. So every day I do offerings, just visualize offerings. Sometimes I don't have much time to do it, I do it quickly, and I visualize all these suffering beings in the suffering realms with my offerings transforming into whatever they need. So for the freezing hell realms, I visualize warm beaches and warm baths and cool and warm breezes. And for the hot hell realms, cooling showers raining down on them. Snow-filled landscapes cooling them down. You can visualize, and it's more merit for you. You just visualize quickly making offerings. Your offerings transform, and your water bowl offerings in your altar transform into whatever those beings need to alleviate their suffering, bringing them to ultimate happiness. Like that. Any final questions today on anything I've been talking about?
Venerable Amy, I have one. So where does the pure realm fit in? It's not one of the realms that we can be reborn in, is that correct?
I think the pure realms would be, I think you would take rebirth as a human there, but in such an extensive amount of merit that all those conditions to practice Dharma are available. So not the God realm type of thing, but and how do you, Khandro, do you have a view of the pure realm of where? Because you take rebirth as a human there, but it's just perfect conditions to practice Dharma. You can actually set that up now in your own life, in a way. Like what I was thinking of one time at Vajrapani, the years there, I was working full-time for the center, doing administration and other things, but everything I was doing was practicing Dharma. Every moment was, and then there were so many incredible teachings happening and retreats and initiations, and then on the off time, my break times, we were in retreat or I was doing Nundro, preliminary practices all the time. So it was, I really had a good condition there. And at times in my life, I've set that up again where I can just practice and things like that. So, but they say there's actually pure realms you can go to, and it's even better, much better. So Lama Lundrup, the abbot of Kopan, once we were talking about it, and he said to me, I was headed my first time to Laudo. Laudo is a remote retreat center near Mount Everest in Nepal, where I'm going this summer, where Rinpoche's sister lives. She's an elderly nun, and Rinpoche has a holy cave there, small cave, where he was said to have gotten enlightened when he was a lay lama before his life as Lama Zopa Rinpoche. It's a very special place, and so when my first time there, I was with an older nun friend who'd been around Dharma for years, and we had a talk with Lama Lundrup, and I was a little bit nervous about this trip to Laudo because it's hard to get to, and very remote and very primitive at the time, and so Lama Lundrup was talking about it, and I think he was trying to alleviate my fears, and he said, the pure land is at Laudo, is near Laudo. And he said the pure land, and he said, you want a cup of tea? And then he'd say, perfect cup of tea. You want an apple? Perfect apple. Just appears. So you don't need to work for your food. You don't need to, you're just, whatever you need, whatever nourishment, which is mostly the Dharma, you're totally supported. And all you have to do is think it and then manifest like that. So that sounds pretty cool, doesn't it? Sounds pretty good.
And there's a quick question on Zoom as well.
Very quick.
Okay.
Oh,
But that's
about-
all I know about the pure realms of.
Right, about the pure realms, asked a lama at one point, and he said, it's both and. It's in your mind, it's
Yes, that
created
state
by
of
your
mind
mind.
would be part of
and
it.
On a very subtle level, it also, and he said
Can
the
manifest,
same thing
yeah.
about the hell realms.
Yes,
So I just.
yes, that's,
And,
yeah.
and I'm gonna, 30 seconds, Geshe-la was traveling with a member of the center, and he said, you know, as you pass over, you know, the Himalayas for the first time, or if you can see Mount Everest, you, whatever wish you make will be granted. And so, so afterwards, Geshe-la said, well, what did you know, you didn't have to keep it secret. What did you ask for? And they said, well, I asked to be reborn in Amitabha's Pure Land. And Geshe-la looked at the person and said, you didn't ask for enlightenment?
And there are some things, if you ever go, some of you have been to Kathmandu, Nepal. If you go outside Kathmandu to Bodhanath, there's a city block-sized stupa, shrine. And up above that is Kopan Monastery. Above, at the hill above, you can walk up to Kopan. But the stupa, they say, when you come back to Kathmandu, or anytime you're visiting Kathmandu, you go to the stupa, the first time you see it, the same thing, make your prayers, because those prayers will become actualized. So whatever prayers you see when you first see the stupa, to make strong prayers there, they say it's very effective for the mind. Again, these things are, if you have faith in them, it manifests. You don't have faith, then nothing like that. So there's a big part faith does play in the different lineages and spiritualities. Question, yeah.
Okay, quick question from a student on Zoom. We can only see the human and animal realm, correct?
For the most part, I think there are people that can interact with the Preta realm. I've never been able to do that, but I've heard that. But the animal realm and the human realm are generally the ones we would interact with, even though we may see people in the human realm that seem to be experiencing a hell mindset, things like that. We do come across that once in a while. But generally, just those two realms, but sometimes the Preta realm. Yeah.
Do you have time for another question on Zoom?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Naga, unmute.
Just keep it brief if you can. Yeah.
Yeah, my question was because you mentioned about Milarepa's not making it difficult for him. His wife was making, the teacher's wife was giving support. So if we are praying for hungry ghosts and all this, are we lessening their time? Are we increasing their
helping, if
time
we're
for
doing what?
enlightenment? Like if they
Sorry.
had to, can you hear me?
I'm not hearing, I'm not understanding you. Sorry.
Okay.
So
If
about
you-
Milarepa's wife, I got that part.
Okay, because she helped Milarepa,
Yeah, I got that part.
the teacher. So I'm trying to see if we are keep praying for the bad people or hungry ghosts, are we lessening their, suffering?
No, not praying for people. No, that's really helpful. Prayer circles seem to be really helpful. So that doesn't lessen it's a very unique situation that, the Milarepa thing where, so there are times, for instance, we don't euthanize animals in Buddhism. We try not to. It's hard for people when your dog is really suffering. But what the belief is, unless you know the mind of the dog, is often when they're really suffering, which can be a great inconvenience for you, they're incontinent, they're whatever. We just lost our neighbor's dog next door, and it can be a lot of work for you, but better to keep the animals comfortable as you can. I've gotten sleeping pills to break up in small pieces for them. I've gotten painkillers for them, and let them suffer out, let them live out without the suffering, but let them live out that animal time, because it could be better for a future rebirth for them that they've finished it. If you interrupt it and euthanize, they may have to come back and continue whatever they didn't finish and die as a young baby or an animal like that. So we just don't know unless you know the mind of the animal. We tend to just make them as comfortable as possible with painkillers and sleeping pills you can, and then let them pass away. So by praying for people, you're not minimizing their karmic purification. Thank you, Naga.
Thank you so much.
Andre?
Yeah, you're going to continue with this tomorrow with the death and dying process?
I've kind of finished that part up. That,
Okay.
yeah, do you have a question on? But we
Yeah,
can always
let
ask
me-
questions again if there's something related
Yeah,
to
let me
today.
ask this. I'm just wondering about when people are in a coma, what's going on there? I mean, because they're not dead, they're not alive, right?
Yep.
They're in a coma. So,
So we
what's
talked about
happening?
this earlier, about the people with Alzheimer's or
Yeah, that's
they're
where I
brain
got
dead.
yeah,
Yeah, so I think it's similar, like I don't know what their subtle consciousness is experiencing.
yeah,
And obviously there's some karma to be in a situation like that, sometimes for years.
yeah.
They've created some karma of, I can't say what it is
Just
necessarily.
being in between. Yeah.
Yeah, of being, you're not really in a bardo, but you're still in a human form, but
Yeah.
the mind is not functioning on a level that, I don't know what their inner experience is. It would be interesting to know. Some people have come back, and I had a friend that came back from a brief coma, and she said she heard everything in the room going on. They do say the hearing's sometimes the last to go, so we do want to be very skillful what we're saying around dying people.
Yeah, I was wondering, is it the same thing like not touching and stuff like that, would that still apply for people?
Generally, it would apply. I would say, I mean, obviously, if there's some things the medical team thinks could be helpful. With my mother, who was in a coma for 7 months, they told us to stimulate her as much as possible because there was some brain activity at the time, and they thought there would be a chance of her recovering, but she never did. Now, the other thing is there's something called locked-in syndrome, some of you have heard of. It's something I hope I never get or none of you ever end up in. It usually comes as a result of a stroke, and you can end up fully functioning and hearing and being cognizant, and you cannot move any part of your body or speak. So there's a book called The Butterfly and the Diving Bell or something, so it's a true story of the publisher of Elle magazine, or a big famous French. He had a major stroke. This was a complete player, a guy that had a major stroke, ended up in locked-in syndrome. The only thing he could move was he could blink one eye. That was it. This was a fully functioning person I think in his 50s, ended up having this neurological event that took his brain out, basically. Based on when they determined that he was in there because of the blinking, right, he wrote a book, Blinking One Eye. A was 1 blink. B, 2 blinks. Read the book. It's fascinating. They made a documentary about it. It was unbelievable. It's a thin book, okay? Right? But it's a fascinating story of his experience with locked-in syndrome. It's a terrible thing, and he eventually died. He probably died from bed ulcers, I bet. Because you don't know how serious those are, and they just take you down. They can't move you enough to prevent abrasions to the skin, and who knows, I don't know what he died from, but he died a couple years later, 2 years with locked-in syndrome, and he wrote a book, and he said, there was even humor where he said he had a staff of people that would come through and do the dictation as he'd dictate another chapter, letter by letter, 1 blink at a time. But what happens is if you have a word that looks like it fits in and the word is that, and you got the THA, he said there were some people that would come and they'd right away get the word that. And they go, oh, is it that? Blink once if it's that. And he'd blink once, and that was the end of that. There were some that needed him to go through the whole alphabet to T to make sure that that was the letter. Like, he writes this in the book. It was fascinating. Fascinating and tragic, but amazing that he came out to write a book about the experience. So he was totally there. And he talked about people moving him, and when people moved him in the wheelchair to sit him up, and some of them would move him better, and sometimes there was enormous pain moving him, and they got him in the wrong position, and there was nothing he could do. There's not, that's it. There are people that were in a rush, people that were kinder, people that were more gentle and like that. So it's hard to know what is the person there? Then they do, like we said, the MRI, and they say there's no brain activity. I could see with my mother, there was lessening. There were things operating at first, and then there was less of that. And they said that, so I don't know if they really know everything, right? What they can know. But some people come back and say they had this experience or that experience, or there's also this, this was, who was the guy, Ibn Alexander? He started a whole movement. He was a neurosurgeon. Neurosurgeons get a little bit more attention, a little bit more, people believe them more than just, but he got a form of meningitis. I think the book is called Proof of Heaven. Anybody read this book? Proof of Heaven. Okay. He got meningitis. He got this form of meningitis. Nobody knows how he got it. It's not the normal form you'd get. From whenever he got this form of meningitis, something happened. He got ill. It was 2 sons and his wife. He went to the hospital, and everything was shutting down in his system. And they they figured out this, and they found out it's meningitis. And then overnight, he went into a coma. They said to the wife, "We don't think he's going to survive. Like, just the system's not working." And he was in a coma for a week, and came out of the coma, recovered. And that week, he had a whole adventure. He called it heaven and God, and he was grace like that. There was a proof of heaven because this is what he experienced. That was his thing, his vision. So it's really hard to say. It's very individual. His own near-death experience, let's say, who he met on the journey, what was his experience. I had a near-death experience as well. I had a different experience, but also some sort of awakening. Also some sort of the beginning of my spiritual life. Clearly was that moment. I mean, it may have begun before, but then it was like a more conscious, like 14 years old, kind of suddenly something changed like that, just based on that. So I think there's all kinds of, I wouldn't say I was in a coma. No, not at all. So, but there's a lot of, anybody that's had near-death experiences, you've had probably, there's probably been some experience of something different that manifested in that time. Could be. Some other people I've talked to with near-death experience had, some interesting things occur. Yeah. Okay, we're going to stop there for today. Thank you so much for your wonderful attention, for joining. I really appreciate it. It's lovely seeing all of you. And we're going to dedicate the merit, and tomorrow we're going to talk more practically. What do we do? How do we help? Organ donation, euthanasia, all kinds of things like that. And getting our paperwork together as well. And then any other questions as well we'll go over. May we dedicate whatever positive energy we've created from all of our work today, all of our great effort, to remember death and dying, death and rebirth as much as we can in our everyday life, so that we can make the most meaning of our lives right now, that we can build a rich, consistent practice and keep that going, that will help move us along a path to an enlightenment so we can benefit all living beings. We're going to do some dedication prayers from this book. And we're going to turn to page...
It's 235.
No, I'm going to do a different one. Thank you so much. Page 32, midway down. This is the... or maybe let's start with page 235, and then we're going to go to Master Shantideva. One of my favorite dedication prayers. We're going to chant a couple of these in the phonetics so you can hear the Tibetan chanting. Gewadi no dudan lama sangye drogyorne drowa chikyang maluba Dei sala parjo Janju senjo rinpoche Mage panam ge gyurjig Ge wanyam pa me pa yang Gone gondu belwarjo. Just as the brave Manjushri and Samantabhadra too realize things as they are, I too dedicate all these merits in the best way, that I may follow their perfect example. Page 32, please, in the middle of the page. This is from Master Shantideva. Let's send this out to the universe. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness, and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. We'll go to page 244, the short, long life prayer for His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Gam ri rang wei ko wei jing kam de pen dang de wa ma lu chung wei ne chen rei zi guang ten jing ga to yi sha pe zi de bar du teng yu ji. And the last page at the end of the book for Lama Zopa Rinpoche's swift return. Peerless teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious one, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Losang father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of the infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now. Holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings, through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make request. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and from other living beings you suddenly departed to peace, what a great loss. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels, the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious one, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. The morning is it 10 o'clock?
10:30 until noon.
10:30 till noon is there is another world is the title. So it's an hour and a half session on something different, creating a different reality for yourself. Is it possible to do that? How to orient our thinking like that, okay? And then we will start at?
Then we break for lunch from 12 to 1:30 and start the workshop again at 1:30 till 4.
1:30 till 4, okay, tomorrow. So we'll continue and like that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a good night, and remember, it could be your last. I hope it's not.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone online.